He says, every day may not be worth it, but at least we smile. Guys, welcome to the Table Talk Radio Show. My name is Tanisha Simpkins. Table Talk Show is here on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We invite you to share, do some likes, let people know that we're on. We're here to talk about different things, bring it to the table, whether it's politics, education, social justice, health, laws, economics, all of those things we're here to talk about. And today we have some amazing guests, return guests, and I like it when they say yes to the Table Talk Radio Show. We have our host, myself, our host, Pastor A, Nathan Austin. Hey. And then we also
Hey.
he's so smooth. And then we also have our host here, Dr. Teresa Lee. Say hello. And then we have some awesome guests that talks about economics and money, empowerment, and that's Dr. David Dozier Carr, Doris Carr, sorry. And we have someone who's running for the candidacy of District 20 U.S. Representative Congress, hopefully. That's Sheila. Who do you have in front of your name, Sheila? Oh, you should put Miss Sheila. I cannot pronounce your surname there. You have
Cerfilus-McCormick.
Cerfilus-McCormick. Thank you so much. All right, guys. So this week alone has been a busy week. And last week, let me know if I'm echoing out there. And last week, when the thing was I was talking, I had like a couple of people say, "Talk about this, talk about politics, talk about this." And I said, "Well, we talk about various things, so we don't talk about this the same thing every Monday. You know, you have to keep the show interesting." So they have declared, which I never knew last year, that this month is National Black Business Month. Did anybody know that? I didn't know that until the other day.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, you already knew that.
Yes.
And I have a business. I'm sure you knew, Dr. David, that August was National Black Business Month.
I was informed by I'm a member of the Broad Black Chamber of Commerce. They sent an email, and I'm like, okay.
Okay. So maybe this is something I knew. Maybe I need to look and see when it's established because we can't establish certain national days. That's all you have to do is apply for it. So maybe it was something new that was just established. But if it was, hey, more power to the people about it. But my thing about it is, so what do we do? You know, for National Black Business Month. You saying yes, Janie? Yes, I'm echoing, or yes, you can hear me.
You're good to me.
Maybe she's saying yes,
Huh?
she knew about it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. So the question is like, what do we do about it? So a lot of people receive, some people I would say receive the PPP. Um, monies for their business. Some between 5,000, some between 40, some like 100,000. I've seen some cases. That's a lot of money. 100,000 for their small business loans or grants or however you want to call it. Then some people didn't get approved for reasons. It could be credit history, and a lot of them for their credit scores. Am I right, David? So my question would be now is now that we've gotten it out the way, um, how do we bring it to our community? And everybody who's on here is with community activities and stuff. How do we? Yes, I'm echoing. How do we bring it to our community to have that economic ownership? What is it that we're missing from the monies that we get? I know it's ours personally for our business, but in this space that we're in, because I keep calling it a space because it's a great space for Black Americans, African Americans, brown and Black people. How do we bring that money back into our community for ownership? And I would say to Sheila, how do we try to create something? Because what you do as a representative for us in our district is try to create laws for the community and what we should be adhering by. So how do we bring that money back? And while you guys are discussing that, I think I got the log off and log back on because I'm echoing.
Um,
Well, it comes down to economic equality, right? We have to start putting some rules in place, some laws where we're not just saying that these laws exist, because there are rules on the books already, but who is enforcing them? No one's enforcing them. We know that we have an issue in Broward and Palm Beach where we're not getting the right proportional amount of programs, funding, contracts. We're not getting those grants. We're not even getting the contracts. If anything, we'll get some subcontracts, and those subcontracts are going to be negotiated so hard that we're getting less than what other corporations are getting. And to be honest with you, those corporations are going to be non-minority corporations. This has been a practice that's been existing in Broward and Palm Beach for the longest of time and has never been challenged. We hear a lot of new political people saying we're going to do a study. There is no need for a study. We know what it is. We're on business. We know we're left out. But from a national standpoint, we have to start attacking this and start taking it seriously as far as inclusion, because that's where we are. We're left out. So even though we may get the PPP money, and a lot of us don't even know how to make it turn into a grant. It's going to be a loan for a lot of our companies because they didn't know. Even though we get that money coming in, that is not going to sustain us on the long run. The long run, we have to make sure that we have inclusion. That starts by making sure that federal contracts, federal grants are going to the community. In our district, District 20, which is Palm Beach and Broward County, we have majority women, we have majority business women, and we're not getting those contracts. And we know that. So we can't stand by not demanding that that's taken seriously on a federal level.
I think that's a great point. I think another thing that I think we can do, so I think it's a multifaceted approach. Number one, I believe that we can do more to support one another. When you read about the civil rights era, you realize how they use the power of the dollar and where they're spending their money to enhance change. So I believe that we need to shop black. We need to support one another, because we have a lot of economic power that we're underutilizing. In
In
terms of
conjunction, go ahead.
in terms of the PPP, I just noticed that there's also a lot of fraud going on right now too, because they changed. Prior, they wanted you to submit all the documentation. Now they're saying that you can just swear that you have the documentation. So there's people that are telling people, listen, I can get you this amount of money, just pay me $2,500 or pay me this amount. And what you need to be aware of is what they're telling you to put on the paper can easily be verified. And if you're putting incorrect information, and someone decides to enforce that, you're putting yourself in legal jeopardy for no reason. Uh, if you get an amount, the way that they calculate the amount that you're supposed to get is your average monthly amount for 2019, whatever your average payroll was, times 2.5. So if you have a business and your average monthly payroll, including yourself, was $10,000. $10,000 times 2.5 means you would be eligible for $25,000. If you're getting more than that, and you look at your payroll, they can easily verify that. So be careful. There's a big scam going around where people are telling people, "Hey, pay me some money, and I'll get you 20,000, and I'll get you 30,000. All you have to do is be a business owner." The fact is, they're going to be using your 2019 average payroll expense to calculate their amount.
Yeah, David,
I,
you're absolutely right.
I'm gonna say wow on that. Go ahead, because
You're
I've
absolutely
seen
right.
people I know.
I have friends and colleagues who have tried to convince me of what they got, and just knowing the size of when they were saying they got it for their ministry, just knowing the size of their ministry, I kind of knew how they was able to achieve it, and they tried to drag me down that rabbit hole, and as you said, all of these things can be verifiable. And one thing we know about the government, they're slow in giving and they're slow in reacting. And so, it may be 2025 where a task force will be formed so to figure out how can we recruit some of this money back. And this is where a lot of things are going to hit the fan. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't look at things in the long term. They tend to try to just meet a need for the short term. And whenever you're getting money from the government, you have to understand that there are some things, there are some hurdles that you need to cross. They've made it very easy to turn it into a grant by just making sure that you put it back into payroll. And if you do that, you're fine. But of course, we know that if your payroll was not that amount in the first place, it's going to be hard for you to allocate all of that money back into payroll unless you're going to give yourself a substantial raise between now and the end of that period. So you're absolutely right.
And there's people going to prison because of it as well. So,
Right.
it's not just, hey, you might have to, pay it back. There's criminal liability that people are exposing themselves to. So, and a lot of honest people I know, they kind of abdicate the responsibility to the accountant or whoever says they're an expert. They're not double checking what the person is putting on there. But the problem is you're signing it
Right.
and you're putting your name on that paper. They're not going to go after him. They're going to come after you.
And if they take you to prison, that's one way of getting their money back. They get a lot of free labor from you. They get more money with putting you in prison than ask you to get the money back. Honestly.
Unfortunately, the for-profit prison system.
Right. Absolutely.
So
I think
how do we as a community? Go ahead, Dr. Lee.
I think if we're going to talk about back to your original question of empowering the community, I think we have to stop requiring minorities to be excellent and white people to be average to get the same amount of money. We have to stop drowning our minorities in student loans and then wondering why they can't pour back into the community because they have to go for the bigger establishments that can give them discounts. We have to be mindful of redlining and call our people on it, call our inspectors on it. Why is it that a house twice the size of a majority house, of a minority house, excuse me, why is it a minority's house can be larger in a different area and be half the price? We have to really start calling those things out. It's hard to become economically empowered if we're not going to talk about our economic oppression. Because without acknowledging that, we'll simply point fingers and say who's irresponsible and who's breaking the law and who's trying to get over. When the average minority is not trying to do tax schemes. They're just trying to feed their children, pay their bills, and maybe go to the Keys for a vacation. They're not trying to rape the government for millions of dollars. They just want to survive. And the unfortunate narrative is if you're poor, you're lazy. If you're poor, you're economically irresponsible. And that's just not the case. That's just not the case. We have to definitely talk about our minimum wage. Is it actually a living wage? We all know it is not. And yet we don't want to pay those people who were forced to work through a pandemic. Our fast food workers, our grocery store workers, we still say they aren't worth it. But then ready to evict them and put a 3-day notice on their doors when they don't have the money by the 3rd. We have to first address the oppression. We have to address the systematic racism before we can truly empower people, because a lot of the economic disadvantage that we see is not people being irresponsible. It is people being oppressed and depressed.
You
Wow.
know, I'm happy you mentioned that because I was going to mention that right after Doctor spoke first. If you look at the root causes why our community isn't able to go forward, it's not that we're really not saving enough. We're just not making enough. Pay inequality still exists. No one is enforcing, okay, you have to pay people correctly. If you even try to make it a legal issue, you have to put so much money out trying to fight that corporation to prove that you're not getting paid the same, unless you have someone inside who's going to blow that whistle. So if you look at the situation we're in, it really is a failure with our political leaders who are not taking up the issue for us and enforcing that. The same way that we see if someone gets penalized, like we're getting penalized if you do something fraudulent, we have to take the same approach with these departments that have this funding. If your department is not contracting with minorities, then you should be penalized. There's a certain amount of money you need to pay back. But we turn a blind eye and say, okay, let's fully fund them again. No, we're not funding you anymore if you can't diversify. We have to take a stand on that. We need to understand that even putting minorities on boards is important. When you're on a board, you have access now to vote on who's getting those contracts in that company. You have access now to vote who's getting hired and how much we're paying. So the inclusion issue is huge and it's rapid, and it has to become a priority for our community, and it has to be charged and led by every single candidate, not just people running for Congress, but the president too. If you want to run, what's his name, Biden, and say that black people have to vote for you, well then, okay, where's the initiative? Are you going to actually deal with our economic suppression, our economic being excluded? Are you going to actually champion those things? And we have to fight for it now. This is our opening. If you look at the vote, the minority vote, it's the strongest. No one is getting there without our vote. They try to pander and pretend that they're here for us, but they haven't. And so when we start taking those steps and being serious about it, even in Congress, which I plan on fighting for that, then we'll start seeing change. But we can't continue to look at ourselves and say, what are we doing wrong? We're doing everything right. In our district, we have so many people who are overeducated but getting underpaid. And we live by that every single day. And I feel like some people got used to it. If we're similarly situated and I have my accolades are higher than yours, I deserve to get paid more than you. And that's not what we're seeing now.
Yeah,
So that thing about the reparation of giving money or giving land or giving this. I was pretty much on the fence now. Y'all don't beat me up, only because of basically what Dr. Lee and Sheila has said, that in our mind we have to echoing. We have to know what we're doing. We have to make sure how to budget. We have to make sure, we have to have a plan basically of what we would do if they say right now I'm giving every Black American $30,000. Are we going to bring it back to our community? Are we going to say, okay, let's team up and let's build some apartments or construction or whatever, just naming out some things. Will that happen, or will it just be spent furiously on anything? And I think that Sheila, Dr. Lee, and everyone else, that comes from the community of us doing some type of workshop, or even you, Dr. Lee, when you're doing your shows, you're giving education. I think the more that we give education, because you never know who's listening, the more that we give education, the more people feed into it, they tend to realize that, okay, well, this is what I need to do. They may not tell you, but, this is what I need to do. How can we have how can we get people to come to it, I guess? I mean, even if we're not with the COVID, how do we get people to come to it? Sheila, I see you smiling.
Yeah.
David, go ahead.
I'm
Go
going to
ahead.
mention. Oh, sorry, David. Go ahead.
yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Um, money without education doesn't help. A majority of people that win the lottery, I think it's over 90%, within 7 years are back to where they were, if not worse, within 7 years. And yet, if you meet successful entrepreneurs that are multimillionaires, there's very few that can tell you that they haven't had a time in their career where they lost it and had to rebuild it. Because if you have the knowledge, you can rebuild it. You can rebuild the
Right.
money. But if you get the money without the knowledge in terms of what to do with it, then it's like, for example, when you read a lot of these athletes that go bankrupt, NFL players, NBA players. If you make $12 an hour and you're spending $14, you can make 12 million. If you're spending 14 million, if you're spending more than you bring in, it's the same. So getting educated on money management, understanding that I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of empowering our community. Now, I'm not saying that the panacea. I'm not saying that the all and be all. As I said before, I definitely believe that there's a lot we can do and a lot we should do. But I don't believe that government is the all inclusive savior that's going to solve everything. I believe that there are some things the government can do and should do, and we should hold our leaders accountable to it. But I also believe that, like you mentioned, education, learning about money management, learning about entrepreneurship, maybe signing up for Dr. Lee's classes, or whoever else is doing some empowerment, some knowledge. And I think that was an Amber Alert, by the way.
Yeah. I,
Oh,
I,
yeah, it was. I wanted to mention something. I think a lot of times we are very hard on ourselves as a community. I have a business, and a lot of my colleagues, when I ask them their story, how did you get into business? Do you know a lot of them inherited? And they're getting a windfall. So when they spend that money callously, don't know what they're doing, they have enough to sustain themselves to go up and down. Whereas when we put our money together, we never see a windfall like that. We never get that inheritance where it's just flowing on you. For us, a lot of our businesses, it takes a lot of grace because anybody starting a business is you're going to make the wrong decisions sometimes. You really are. And it's just a learning curve. And that learning curve, unfortunately, costs dollars. Even if you have the best education, they can't teach you the trends and how people are. They're dynamic. Your business is always changing. And so I think we have to start understanding what it really takes, which is financial dollars, to have a sustainable business. So I do believe the first step is not that government is regulating business, but making sure we're getting a fair share of that amount. You know? And then when you talk about educating people financially, I think we desperately need it. And it's for those reasons, because when we did have any kind of wealth, when we did establish any kind of businesses, it was taken away from us. Anytime in history when we're getting there. So I smile when people talk about reparations because it's necessary. In anything in life, you must pay back. You cannot steal from a people and expect it to ride on and nothing, be no consequences. It's not right. And I think everybody's starting to see that. So the conversation about reparations, I truly believe that's something that our generation is going to complete. There will be reparations. It's just, what are those reparations? Do I think we need to have education? Yes. Do I think we need to have financial education? Of course, because we're behind. I think we all could admit that we're behind when it comes to understanding finances and where to place it. I think that, a lot of people who have money, they also have money to pay for their media and their marketing. And they spin these stories like Trump, who says he's always been successful, but it's not true. And when I talk to a lot of business leaders who've been in business and they're making multi-million dollars, they can't count how many times they went bankrupt and started another one. But we're so hard on ourselves that we're afraid to start. We're scared we're going to fail. And we're scared to admit we failed and that we need like a group to come in and help our businesses. That's another thing with businesses. You got to partner. Because at one time with my business, I'm in healthcare. So in healthcare, we've been able to survive COVID. We're still thriving. So if I have a friend who's in a law firm and they're not doing well, we got to partner. Because there might be a time where healthcare is sinking that I got to, lean on you too. So as a community, it really is going to take a combination of things, which is the policies, enforcement, making sure we're punishing them. But also as a people, we do have to start holding each other up, not judging, and understanding this is going to be a ride and this is going to be us learning how to succeed, but we will get there.
I think that
When you were
okay, I think to bring it together, Tanisha, answer your question. Um, we talked about education and those things as well, but I think a part of reparations not shouldn't just be individuals, but reparations should go towards communities. You asked the question of how to keep, if we were to receive reparations, how do we keep those
I like
dollars
that.
into the community? Well, the dollars are going to be spent somewhere. So basically, what you're trying to figure out is how can we stop the money from going outside of the community? Well, it's simple. You need to turn the communities into the places where we're sending the dollars. So if I'm getting a reparation check and I'm going to Target, chances are I'm going to Target outside of my neighborhood. But if we partner with a Target and whatever you got to do, a break or whatever to say, no, we know certain places or Publix, whenever you say certain businesses, a Target, Publix, you kind of already know the type of neighborhood a person lives. Why? Because there is a norm that those type of stores are only in certain type of neighborhoods. However, we can change that narrative if we place those types of businesses into our communities that will, in essence, build our communities up. Certain types of businesses and restaurants drive certain people to want to live in those communities, and then our communities will be built up as well, so that when we are making money, African Americans do not have to move or spend their money outside of the community. And that's what's basically happening. Every time someone receives, whether it's reparations, whether it's a lump sum of money, a lotto, a raise, they move or spend their money outside of their community because everything that they're desiring cannot be found in their particular community. So I think a part of reparations has to be the intentional building up of the urban communities, because if not, then it's still going to leave the urban communities in slum and plight because everybody else is going to move. And so I think that has to be a part of what we do, build intentionally building up the community through dollars and buildings.
And I'm glad you said that because that's what I would like to see. And I know I feel like sometimes our cities and our government, they trick us sometimes. And I'm going to use that word. It's real a simple word. They trick us because they'll say that we're going to give this, we're going to build up our Sixth Street, we're going to build up our Pompano, we're going to build up our Liberty City, our Overtown. And then what happens is you have people that come and buy out these stores or whatever, and they build a parking lot or they build some high rises. And then it's like, okay, well, what happened? Yeah, I mean, you went down there, you bamboozled to me, the people, in certain areas. And I'm just saying it because I know people that sit on these boards for the CRA or whatever. It's like one particular, like you said, Sheila, board. This holds all the control of what's going to be built in our cities, but without asking the people. And I believe in that, what you said, Nathan, about having our own targets or having whatever you want to call them. But we have to shop at those places. I like having things in the community other than the liquor store, a hair store, a barber shop, and a food shop. It's like those are like the most common things that you can find on every corner. We
Check
want those
cashing
other
store.
things. Oh yeah, the
I,
check.
you,
Well, I don't know if they still doing the check casher store.
Oh,
Yeah.
they still got
Go ahead.
plenty of them.
I just think that, we got to be honest, guys. If you got to be honest, let's call a spade a spade. It comes down to federal dollars. Anytime federal
Right.
dollars have come into a city, because you have to understand how much money federal dollars are. We know we're dealing with trillions of dollars. Think about 9/11. When that money came into New York, Manhattan, 42nd Street had a whole bunch of stuff going on. It did not look like that. But after 9/11, they totally rebuilt it, turned it into like all these lights and cameras, and they were even able to get the crime going down, right? When I went to South Carolina, I was looking at how the people in South Carolina are living and how the congressman is bringing everybody over there. He's telling you very clearly, if you want to run for president, if you don't come to South Carolina and get to this fish fry, no, you're not going to get South Carolina. We're not giving you these votes. They're coming in and they are totally changing the trajectory of these cities. If you look at our Broward County, how much money does Broward County really have? Can they do that? Can they really change and give jobs? No. So why are we continuously fighting for crumbs? Our cities, how much money do they really have? We have to ask ourselves that these questions and place the responsibility where it is. If we are electing people for Congress, how much of those funds are coming back? We've had the same congressperson for 27 years. How much money came back? Have we built anything? You can't win Florida if you don't get Broward and Palm Beach County and Miami. Have we ever had a fish fry or anything down here where we brought people here to buy, see our people, speak to us, hear our voices? We've never had that. And so we can't stay complacent. And another thing that we have to look at is the incentives. Who's being incentivized for what? The tax breaks that they're getting, the federal tax breaks they're getting, that's only to buy property. That encourages regentrification. That does not encourage them putting money into our businesses. We can use the same model and change that where we have these opportunity zones where now they can put money into businesses. So federally, we'll give you a tax deduction, but you have to put it into a black business. All of a sudden, you're going to see when that money comes into that black business, they can make it look like Target because now they're sitting on 5 million to start a business. When you got 100,000 to start a business and you have 5 million to start a business, it looks totally different. With that 5 million, you can target a population, you can make it as nice as possible, and you can bring other people in. But when you're starting with 100,000, you're limited. You can't target other people who are outside of your district. You can't bring them in. And so we have to actually look at how can we get ourselves as a community to grow forward, but using every tool we have to our available to us. Because, to be honest with you, I'm tired of us trying to save us. Like, we've been doing this for a while. I mean, how many conversations do we have with each other trying to save each other? For businesses, we're putting money into it. We're just always trying to save us, but then we give our votes away for free. We just hand it to them. We can't. We can't because
So
no one else does that.
so
And
let me
not
ask you
only
guys.
that,
So
oh, go ahead, Denisha.
I wanna pick up on Biden. So is he trying to sell his vote? So his thing is now for his campaign is that he wants to do an economic proposal aimed at racial equality for HBCUs, and that's to, if you guys seen it, to clean the debt of alumni and free education, if I'm not mistaken, for HBCUs. Is that the same thing as trying to
Oh, here
come
come
over here
Dr.
for this
Lee.
vote?
Yeah, I've been itching to get into that now. So one thing that I will say is let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. We saw what happened 4 years ago with a lot of people criticizing Hillary Clinton, this, that, and then it brought in the election of President Trump. Um, Although I am conservative, I never voted for him. Um, I am a Republican, but I never voted for him, and I still don't support him. And I'm afraid that the same thing may happen. What the Trump campaign is focused on is reducing turnout in our communities, reducing turnout, and by spreading things that, listen, let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. If you have to choose between bad and good, let's take the good and then hold them accountable and push tangible things. But if we're saying, well, if it's not perfect, we're not supporting it, then you end
Yep,
up with bad.
that's what's
And that's
happening.
what happened 4 years ago. A
Yeah.
lot of a lot of people in our community, they started supporting third party candidates. They started supporting, and if you look at Hillary Clinton's actual plan, what she planned in her economic plan, I read it. She had a tax break, but it was tied to companies sharing more of the profits to the lower earners. So that way she could bridge the wage gap. But a lot of people didn't take time to read it. They just started focusing on, well, she ain't Bernie Sanders. She's not this, that. And it was this, throwing shade. And then eventually we ended up with Trump. This election is one of the most consequential elections because we're not even fighting for, in my opinion, conservative Republican versus Democrat. I believe this guy has dictatorship tendencies. I
Yeah.
believe that if he wins again, the democracy as we know it may not exist anymore because we've never had a president to get his attorney general get favor for his friends and penalize his enemies. This has never happened.
Right.
We're going to be Russia soon if Trump gets elected. Where if you say anything bad about Trump, if you're his enemy, you might be locked up or losing your job. So that's my biggest caution. I understand we can vote, we can get more engaged, we can act for specific things, but let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good and end up with the bad.
Well, I think that's what I was trying to focus on is that the ask. What are we asking? We as a community right now, when we have people listening to us, what are we asking for? When you're negotiating, you always ask for something that may be 150%, hoping you get 100%, right? And right now, with the women that we have, and even the minorities who are on Biden's campaign, who are writing these policies, they are listening. But could we honestly say that our community had an ask? Could you honestly say that, Broward and Palm Beach County sat down? Do you feel like our representatives put forth an ask and said, you know what? We want you to look at this and make this part of your platform?
The reason why I don't believe that your answer is yes, the reason why the answer is not yes, is because we're not monolithic. We're very diverse. We don't all agree. For example, although I may be voting for Biden, I don't agree with for example, when Dr. Teresa Lee says, hey, let's just increase the minimum wage. I don't agree. I don't think minimum wage increasing benefits. No, I don't, and I don't know if you said that. I'm just giving an example, Doc.
I didn't.
I don't know if increasing the minimum wage solves the problem, because as a business owner and someone that's in finance that have to get businesses money, I know they have to make a profit or they can't get access to capital. So when you tell them, well, you got to pay someone this much, you know what they do? They cut hours or they get machines to do the jobs, those lower on the trade job. So the way that you help someone financially is, there's a theory called human capital theory. The more you learn, the more you earn. And by getting them access to careers that are like in the STEM fields and things of that sort, that can pay more. But if you just say, well, listen, you're not going to learn anything, you're just going to force the business to pay you more, it's not going to solve the problem.
So do
So,
you feel?
in
Go
my
ahead.
opinion,
So do you feel that we couldn't have put forth an ask that would ask for equality, just equity? We just want a fair share in contracts. We just want to
I
get
believe
paid the
there are
same.
some asks. If you read Elizabeth Warren's plan
Mhm.
that Joe Biden adopted, one thing that they were trying to do was to address the capital, the lack of capital within businesses. For example, when white businesses start, they, like you mentioned, they have their fathers, they have their grandfathers, and they're coming in with that generational wealth.
Mhm.
Whereas
Yeah.
all of the black businesses don't have that. So what they if you read the Biden plan that he really took from Elizabeth Warren, he looks to address that through community-based funding.
Mhm. So
I have to
with
jump in
Okay.
there really
So,
quickly,
sorry, go ahead.
real quick,
go ahead.
real quick. So I have to address this since we're saying I hypothetically said it. I didn't exactly, but building businesses on the backs of other people because you can't afford to pay them a living wage is not good business. It's slavery. If you can't afford to run a business, you can't run a business. I don't think that's a viable reason to say we shouldn't raise the minimum wage. If this business can't afford to pay their people, they can't afford to be in business. Maybe we should teach them some financial tools and techniques so that they can
No,
raise
you
their
never
own
had.
income. Here's another
I'm
problem.
a jump in
Hold on,
right
I'm
there
not finished
because
now.
you never had a payroll. I know. I could
I'm
tell that comment said
hold
you
on.
never had. You
I'm
never
not
had a
finished though.
payroll.
I've had a payroll and I agree with her. I've
No,
had a
no, no.
payroll and I
You
No,
agree with
just
her.
I got I had a 70
Secondly,
person payroll. There's no way
here's
in the
the
okay.
thing
world you
though.
can
Here's
agree
the
with
thing.
that.
I understand tight. I understand being tight. I've done payroll before. It may not have come out of my personal pocket, but here's the thing. You can't just say if this business can't afford it, then that's not a reason to raise the minimum wage. So we're just going to live off people struggling just so we can say we're doing good business, and we're not going to hold our politicians accountable to make these rules, put these rules in place. That's horrible. It doesn't make sense. And another thing, so we're going to tell people that they need to go to financial learning classes. They need to learn and empower themselves. But we don't do the same thing for the businesses that we just bailed out with millions of dollars. And this isn't the first time. Again, we have to stop telling minorities that they have to be excellent and white people
That's
can just be
right.
mediocre and get the same results. It's unfair, it's cruel, and it's unusual. So here's the thing with reparations. I totally agree you can put it into the community, but you also have to give people a chance to actually decide what they want to do with it. You don't get to oppress them and then tell them how you're going to repay them and how they have to spend it. It's weird. It's crazy. It doesn't make
Now,
sense. You have to
uh,
give people a chance. Now, offering them
John,
classes,
John, John.
absolutely. But at the same time, to dictate how they can spend it and say, oh, you can't spend it here and you can't spend it there, so you have to learn how to do this, I totally disagree. And final
Yeah.
point,
Oh.
HBCUs, because that was the original question that you asked. I do not think that Joe Biden is buying votes by giving back to HBCUs. I think we have to remember the point of historically Black colleges and universities, and that is because minorities were not welcomed in predominantly white institutions. This wasn't a choice we made to educate ourselves separately. We were forced to segregate because we weren't welcomed at predominantly white institutions, and they have historically been underfunded and undersupported. So to put that money back isn't a favor, it isn't a bribe, it's what is owed to historically Black colleges and universities. Now,
Doc,
Kamala.
Now,
I,
now let
I
me
will I,
say.
I will agree
Oh,
with your last statement, but here's my point. And this is why I'm conservative, and I just can't. I don't buy that point of view. Here's why. Um, in terms of minimum wage, which Biden, I believe he's pandering. He's pandering, so he is going to increase the minimum wage, which I disagree with. Um, when you force a business, the whole thing about capitalism and versus socialism and visible hand of the market is that the market conditions takes care of a lot of these things. If you tell a business, well, I'm going to force you to pay this amount, okay, the government is going to come in and force you to do that. Do you know certain businesses pay more because it's competitive? I believe in profit sharing, but I don't believe in increasing someone's bottom line and saying, well, it has to be this. Because historically, most of the people that support it have not looked to see whether it works or not. If you
So
just
let
go and look, for example, when New York instituted a minimum wage increase, the people that got hurt the most were at the bottom. Because you know what a business person does? They cut, they got one of two choices. Either they cut hours, cut costs, or increase the cost of things so they can protect their profit
They do that
margin.
anyway.
so
So
hold on.
when they increase the profit, when they increase the cost of things, you call that wage push inflation. So when the government says, okay, everybody has to pay more, what happens is the cost of everything goes up
Right.
Hold on. Let's
because
Right.
people
discuss
have
that.
to
Happens
protect their
anyway.
profit margins.
Let's
So
discuss
That's
when
that.
also
the
currently
person was
called
at the
COVID
bottom,
tax.
Hold up,
So
David.
the person that
Hold
was
up.
at the
Go ahead.
bottom, their life does not see any significant
okay.
improvement because,
But
yeah, you
that's
gave
no
me
excuse to keep
$10
minimum wage at
for that
$5 for
pay
the next
increase,
20
So
years
hold on.
just
but
because you
now the
can't do
cost
it.
of living just increased by
Go ahead. I'm
30%.
sorry, Sheila. Go
Okay,
ahead,
let me.
please.
So I just want to mention something, right? First of all, let's be clear. We are looking at finances from a state where we know that we are in a place where we don't get paid the same. Once we start equaling the playing field and
That I
businesses,
agree.
minority businesses are getting paid what is due to us, we can pay people what is due to them. So once we start addressing the real issue, which is that we're not getting paid the same, we're not getting those contracts, then yes, we can pay people what they deserve. So it's not an excuse for us to sit in this and say, oh, I can't pay you enough to survive because people are being, they're not paying me. No, we have to make sure we're getting paid first. And this is why it starts with the government. We can't sit back and accept it and then say, hey, hardworking person who's sacrificing everything, you got to starve. That's inhumane. We can't do that as a
But
people. Do you
but
know
when
how
you
many?
But when
Okay,
we
so
hear
and then
minimum
also you
wage,
talked
that's not
about
the argument that's being made. I agree
no,
with what you're saying, but when you look at, and David has a point when he says, when you look at minimum wage, we always think of the big business. We know the McDonald's and the Burger Kings can afford a pay increase. That's not who we're talking about. When you make a minimum wage across the board, that's every business. That what you're saying is that every business that's
The
operating
cost.
has to pay more. And until if they're not making more, which we just talked about how most small businesses are struggling. I don't care what kind of financial plan you have. If you're only making a certain amount of money, there's only so much you're gonna be able to pay. I don't care how many classes you have.
so the
So
business
if
plan
you
that you're
don't
talking
address that, then you're gonna have
mhm.
even more businesses going out because yes, you've increased something, but you haven't addressed this particular business bottom line when they were struggling. They've done everything right. They've balanced the books, but they were struggling because they didn't have enough income coming in the first place. So you can't address. You have to address Ms. McCormick's issue first before we begin to talk about the minimum wage increase. Now to go back to what Dr. Lee says, I think the question that Tanisha asked was, how can we just get the money to go back into the community? I don't think it was a stimulation to getting the reparation. I think what she was trying to say is, if we're going to get black people this money, we should at least try to, and Tanisha, help me if I'm wrong, I think we should try to make a conscious effort to spend the money in the black community. I don't think it would necessarily be a stimulation or to force you to say that. I will say that if a business is getting this money, we should dictate that. But I don't think she was suggesting that either. But I think we have to address the revenue of the businesses first before we can address telling them or forcing them that you have to pay someone $15 an hour. I think if you don't do that, you're fooling yourself. These people are going to be without jobs because these businesses are going to fold.
But Pastor A, you have to understand what's behind.
which
You
is
have to
what
understand what's
happened
behind all
historically.
of this, right? What's
Huh?
behind all? I feel like there needs to be understanding. Let's be clear. You know,
Laws.
no one wants to address the real problem federally. No one wants to address why are black businesses, why are black women, why are women not getting these contracts? It's imperative that we look at this.
That I
And the
agree.
reason why is because if we look at our district, most of the homes are single parent homes headed by women, and they get paid the least with the most education. How are we even going to survive? How are we uplifting the community when we're not addressing pay inequality? When we're not even addressing how much money is coming into the community? And that's why I said we have to start with first things first. And I do believe that if you have a company and you can't pay at least $15, there's a problem there. Right now, we know what the biggest problem is, but we can't
I
use that
agree.
excuse. Well, if my company is going to shut down, because that's what a lot of people said. A lot of people even said that during slavery.
But
Oh, I
then,
can't pay the slaves
do
because
Right.
you
then
remember
I'm going to
the
shut down.
protest? You remember
Right.
the McDonald's protest when all those people at McDonald's were protesting, like, I want $15 an hour to flip this bird. And what McDonald's did, they just started having computers. They,
So you're saying
So
accept pennies or be replaced by computers?
let me tell you
So
about
you're
I'm
saying
saying
McDonald's,
in
right?
that's
no way do we
reality.
fight
No,
for
McDonald's.
humanity?
What I'm
So
saying
hold on.
is,
McDonald's
the
needs to be
reality
punished.
is, if you
Exactly. McDonald's
destroy
needs to
the
be
company,
punished.
if
But
McDonald's.
yeah,
you
we keep
what
talking
about
about McDonald's.
Listen,
What
hold on.
about what
Let
I
me.
about
wasn't
the
talking about McDonald's.
I'm gonna tell you.
no, no,
Let's
Hold
what
on,
I'm
I'm
understand.
just saying we're talking about businesses like
Okay,
McDonald's. What
let's talk.
about just the small business who
Let's
has an employee, one
okay.
employee?
Let's talk first about McDonald's, and I'll tell you why businesses like McDonald's need to be punished. Businesses like McDonald's are paying people now on a card, and for them to even get their invoice of how many hours, they got to go on a computer. Most of these people don't have computers, so they can't even challenge it. So business like with that McDonald's protest, I know if everything about it, and I agree with that McDonald's protest because they're taking advantage of our people.
They're
Now, when
not.
it comes to
McDonald's is a
hold on,
part
I'm not
job. It's not
finished.
a
But
lifetime
wait,
job. It's not a career.
That,
That's
They're
not
that's
true. It
true.
may be a
for
first job
you,
for
for
you,
you,
but
for
everybody
you.
doesn't have the skill sets
That's
for
for
it to be their
you.
only job.
Hold on,
But
but for
that's what
you,
I'm trying to say. Let's address the skill set.
oh, no, it's
Everybody's
not.
not
You
college
can't even
material. You
say.
can't say you
You
all
don't
have to
have
go to
to be
college so you
college
can get
material.
jobs.
There's a lot
Some
of blue
people don't
collar
have
jobs that
that.
pay way more than
And it's
college
But
education.
unfair to label some jobs as these are only for teenagers and these are for working adults. There are
So
people with families who are trying to get by at McDonald's. So to say
I
that you
understand
the
only
that, but
truth
deserve
be
$6
told, you're
and
gonna
you're one of the
always
only
have
restaurants open during a
but
pandemic,
you
truth
are
be
it's cruel and
told, you're gonna
unjust.
always have a
hold
minimum wage job. You're
hold on.
not gonna change that. You're
Hold on,
gonna have you listen. That is and I'm not trying to be bougie, but you're gonna always have lower level jobs. Let's not kid ourselves.
Absolutely.
Every job's not gonna pay like a PhD. We cannot,
Absolutely.
and I'm not suggesting that. I don't know what the minimum wage is now. I don't pay my people minimum. I think it's $7, $8, whatever that is. You're gonna always have a lower level job. That is just the reality. Now, at some point, we may have to agree what that lower level is, but you're going to have that. But what I'm trying to suggest is every time we have this conversation about raising the minimum wage, we only really think about the big business. We know that they're pimping. Let's just use that word. We know they are. But when you make that across the board, the big business, even if McDonald's wanted to do it, they can do it and still survive. That's not
exactly.
the, but the businesses that are not going to survive are the lower tier, smaller business job. And what I'm saying to Ms. McCormick is, and I get what you're saying. I get the congressional speech. I get what you're saying. But what I'm saying is those are two separate conversations. You can't lump those two conversations together. I don't care
they
how
are.
much you try. You
I'm telling
can't lump them together
the
because it doesn't make
reason
any
why
sense. You can't have
the
one without the
reason
other.
listen the reason
I'm
why
gonna
they
let
have to be
Sheila
dealt
say
with.
her last point, then I'm gonna move to something else. Go ahead, Sheila.
Okay, the reason why you have to look at it as a cumulative solution, right? It has to be cumulative because if you start attacking one without the other in the bag, there's only going to be one that's ever going to be done. So we have to look at it on a cumulative level. Let's make sure we have people being incentivized to put money into black businesses. Once that money comes into the black businesses, you can pay it. And then we have to look at raising the minimum wage, but together. It has to be one package of how we're going to stimulate the Black economy. So we shouldn't separate it, and we shouldn't be fighting over it. We have to say we want it all now. And on
And
top
it's
of that,
not just black economy though. When you think about that, this is not just a black economy thing. It's small business owned by white folk. It's not a black economy. If you stimulate the black economy, what if
Let me just
somebody
use
who
an
owns a white
example.
business are having the same thing? This is
but we
not,
were
to me,
talking
this is not a black and white
hold on,
issue.
we were talking about getting money into the Black community. So in the
The
context
community.
of putting money, right, it's in the context of putting money back into the Black community, in the context of reparations and Black issues and HBCUs, it has to be a stimulus package or a package that's cumulative. It cannot be separated.
Okay.
Mm.
So let me ask you guys this question here. And thank you guys for the conversation. I know we all have our difference of opinion and how we feel passionately,
I
but I'm
think we
glad
don't.
we
We're not
have them
breaking
because
these subject matters up. They all like commas. So I'm here. We're trying to tie everything back to the original thought. And Tanisha, I heard a different question. Now we're tying it back to everything. But go ahead. Maybe I'm not putting periods. I'm gonna put commas.
well, the common denominator is for us creating workshops, creating education, creating jobs, creating buildings, because I would like to see more buildings of economics in our community, and I will say our black and brown community. That's the common denominator that I would like, that I want to see, that I think that in this particular space or era that we're in, fighting, the Black Lives Matter, the other institutions who are fighting, who are actually sitting at the table, are hoping that those are some of the things that they're actually fighting for us to build our community. I know we won't be, and we talked about this some time ago, a Black Wall Street, but maybe we can get there. Maybe we could get there. That's just my hope on that. But let me ask you guys here, computer dime. So for the presidential race, it was something that in the Congress had spoken, and they said, do we need a black VP, or do we just really need a black Supreme Court judge? Or can we just have both? Why we can't have both? Um, are we at that point that we just need to choose for you smiling, David, a black president, and preferably a woman, or a black woman as a judge on the Supreme Court? You guys
I,
like
be-
have a minute
I believe Biden is going to choose a black. He said it already. He's going to choose a black person for the Supreme Court. I think a black woman or something of that sort. I believe that's going to be the case. For vice president, I believe he may or may not. I believe he's trying to, that he's more likely to. However, I just want all people to realize whether he does or not, if you don't want 4 more years of Trump, please vote Biden. That's number one. Number two, I hope he does select a black woman. My favorite is Dr. Susan Rice. I feel that, her experience, um, and I know she worked with them. We having a pandemic. We're having all this problem. She has so much experience handling those very issues. One thing that she said that Trump is not talking about is that as a national security advisor, she handed the Trump administration a book
Okay.
on how to deal with pandemic.
She handed the team, gave him the whole team.
Pandemics for dummies. They threw it away. They
Yeah.
did not use the information she gave. So I believe that because of her
All right,
experience.
so David, you said that. What about the Supreme Court? Do we have an option that we either choose a vice president for VP or for our
No, I
Supreme Court
believe he's going
judge?
to see the black Supreme Court for sure.
Yeah.
I believe that. I don't know if he's going to do the VP. I hope he does because some people might motivate him to vote. But I think he's doing the Supreme Court. I think he's going to see the black woman.
Go ahead. What you was about to say, Nathan? Pastor A?
To answer your question, I think I there's a strong possibility he's going to do both. What we need is a black woman on the Supreme Court. That's what I believe we need. Um, Unfortunately, for black people to go out to vote, he's going to need to pick a black woman PD, and it's sad to say. We know it's going to be a woman. That's given. But unfortunately, and I just hate that I say unfortunately, not that it will be a bad thing. I'm just afraid that if it's not, it's going to be hell to pay on election day. And I feel bad that we've become, ignorant and vulnerable in that regard. Because for me, the Supreme Court is golden for me. It's golden. That's something Obama wasn't able to do. To put a black in Supreme Court.
Right,
So
right, right.
I don't think people understand the value of that. But
Yeah.
there's nothing
Dr.
wrong with
Lee,
having
if you
both,
had
and
to
I'm
choose,
not against both. I'm certainly not.
I'd say both.
yeah. Okay.
And I'm just speaking for me.
And
I'm
Sheila,
I think for VP, we do have to the selection that he has, the people who he's choosing between. I think they're all pretty much good candidates for VP. So I would love for him to choose one of them. As far as the Supreme Court, I don't think we should be voting based off of color and gender because people in the Supreme Court are really writing the law and how we go forward. And it's based on their beliefs and their skill sets. We see Clarence Thomas. We see what he's written. We see how far he's gone and what he has done. So when it comes to the Supreme Court, it is not about color and gender at all. How do you think? How do you sympathize? Where is your head at? Where do you belong? That's it for Supreme Court. We can't afford another Clarence Thomas.
Well, that's for any position. I think
I
the
agree with that.
Supreme Court, VP, that's anything. You got to. Uh, we know we're not going. He's not going to put a conservative in there. We know that. You know, you got to
These
see. You got
days,
to look at who appointed Clarence Thomas, though.
I wouldn't put it past anybody because you never know where people are leaning, and that's why I think you should lean very hardly. Supreme Court is different because they're actually
I
writing
got
and reasoning.
It's going to depend on the Senate.
I have
If
one last question, guys, for you before we leave. And it was about the middle class. Somehow they have defined, or Trump administration, what a middle class looks like. And I think Nathan, we were talking about this off the air. And let me think how do I want to phrase this question. I should have wrote it down. How are we defining the middle class? Why are we saying a middle class and opposing to if you are you're black that you're not in a middle class? How are we defining in our mind or by even by gender or race? What are we defining as a middle class in the community now?
If
If
you
I
got
ask
a
that, I
stimulus
try to
check
ask that
back,
right,
you
being
are in a
political
middle
without being
class.
rude. Huh?
I said if you got a stimulus
What'd you
check
say?
back, you kind of middle class. I guess. I don't know.
That's the opposite.
No, if you got one back.
If you
If you
didn't.
didn't, you in upper class. But
Oh, okay. 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 Okay.
I think
I
the
guess I can agree with
definition
that.
I think the definition with middle class and even working class has been used to kind of polarize voters, to kind of separate us instead of us voting on issues that actually affect us. I hear this conversation all the time, but that's working class. That's not, you're not working class if you have a degree. You're working class if you do this. Working class, middle class. I just think those are all words to distract us from what we need to do right now, which is make sure we have a president, people who are fighting for the people all over. And that's what we need to focus on. And these words, this verbiage, it's just used to divide us. So we could say, oh, yeah, I'm middle class, separate us from that person and start voting on the lines of economics and not,
Yeah.
what we
But
should be on the person.
someone sent this to me by text. But when we were talking about the community, they said that if a community does not have any type of HOA, it's something that should be considered as a way of educating and getting, frontline to the community. There's certain communities in Broward that may have a HOA, and even over here I'm in the HOA, but that's a way to actually, and I agree with that, to actually try to help and educate the community as being part of a homeowners association in your community. I think, even if it's
I
just
hate
from certain
HOAs,
street to
so
certain streets. Huh?
I hate HOAs, so don't ask me that question.
That's not
yeah,
nice.
I
I
was just about to say that too. We trying to
telling
kick
my
ass
wife, I
out.
said, listen, man, my next investment property will not be where there's an HOA. I said because man, they tell you
Hallelujah.
what you can do, what you can't do. It's really not an asset unless you can do what you want. You
Right.
know, you can't do Airbnb here. You can't. It's like what? It's just too much. It's like they get overpowered and they. Uh-uh.
A
That's
lot of them
homeowner
buy it
slavery to
too.
me. That's how I look at
Yeah,
HOA.
a lot
That's
of
why I'm having a hard time moving now because I'm trying to. I don't want to be in the HOA. I'm not in one now. Living in a good house, and everywhere I go is a HOA. That's just it's turning me off. I don't want to go.
I know some areas where we have the HOA. If you try and put a lawn sign up, they've been leaving the Republican ones, but they wanted the Democratic ones to come down. And when we challenge them, like, why can't we have? If you're leaving one, you gotta leave the other. So HOAs, we're trying to kick some of them out. The people who are leading it, sometimes it's not in our best interest. So I'm not a fan of HOAs at all.
Maybe the city
Okay.
boards.
Well, you know what? Huh?
I think Pastor D, maybe a week or two ago, talked about how he was on the city board, and was helping with making community decisions and
Oh,
things like
yeah.
that. Maybe something like that. Because I'm with you all on the HOA. It took us over a year to find a house because we did not want to deal with HOAs. And we end up going a whole different route because we couldn't find it. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Community boards is good. Most community have like a community advisory board, or like me, I'm just an honoree. I'm not on the board, but every time I pop in, I just consider it as an honoree. But yeah, I think it's best because one, you can see that you can be the eyes, and be on the ground as to what's going on in your community. And to me, being on the front line of community means a lot to me. What does that person say? I can't see.
The pastors say the HOAs are pain in the gluteus maximus. That's what he
That's
said.
right.
Thanks, Pastor Freeman. So, are we good, guys? When it comes to church, are we just to the end of the year? Is that what we're saying? To the end of the year, we're not returning back into the actual building until the end of the year. Pastor
Well, when
A,
y'all going back? When the members going back? That'll
Doris
tell me when
Carr.
I'm going back.
We have a small
So
group.
I mean, like,
We have a small group that gathers. Um, Pastor Jude gathers with a small group, but we're doing it online until the data says differently. Right now, we try to be data driven versus emotional
okay,
driven.
because the data had driven people to July, and then they said August. So I'm just saying, like, just push it all the way on to the end of the year. Just make it even. Have a nice, maybe New
I'm
Year's
still watching
return.
month to month. I'm watching month to month. If something changes significantly, then yeah, we can be back earlier. But what you're saying is very probable that we're probably going to be out to the end of the year, like you mentioned.
All right, guys. So, guys, I want to thank you for the discussion. Some things I didn't even get because that first part was just that good, and I think it was something that was needed because we may, like I said, we may not all talk on the same conversation, but we're hearing each other, at the same time. I want people to know, Sheila, what do you represent when it comes to running for the candidacy of what you're running for District 20 Congress? What is it that you do? Because we know our mayor, I wouldn't say mayors are, we know our mayor governs our cities and, the commissioner, our departments, police departments, and things of that nature. What exactly, what type of laws can you help us get approved or get done, or to the Senate or to Congress or to DC? What is it that you can do for us?
So the biggest thing that we do in Congress is actually the power of the pen. We write legislation. With that legislation, we're able to fund it. And so we can make sure that not only are the means or the process that's supposed to go into the community, but the money's going into it. We also oversee federal different federal departments and different federal departments. Sorry about that. There's my brother in the background, which is also a benefit for us because that's where the auditing takes place as far as what contracts are going into what community, how much money they're putting out, who is gaining it, which is imperative because once you know that we control and we can look over these corporations and these departments, we have the access to make sure equality is there and equity is there. Another thing that we do, we actually take care of cases for the community. So if you have an issue, you call your congressman, and your congressman is supposed to facilitate that. Now, when your congressman opens up an investigation, be it for if you're in the military, if you have an issue with the IRS, any kind of federal department or agency, that's when we step in and we can actually fight on your behalf, or we can inquire into it. So a lot of things that we're talking about right now, there is a direct correlation of who can facilitate that for you and who can make it happen. It just so happens that we're sitting in a year where we're on the cusp of having a lot of things go our way as far as the Democratic Party. If the Democratic Party, if Biden does win, which I'm hoping he wins, and I see him winning, if Biden does win, then at that point, we're going to have a Democratic president. The Democrats are going to have the House, and more than likely, we're going to have a lot of votes in the Senate. So we'll be able to push through a lot of initiatives, especially while people now are paying attention to our communities, are paying attention to Florida and other areas, Palm Beach. This is when we have an opportunity to leverage our ask. And that's why I push that so much, because it's not every time in history that people are looking at us and asking us, what do you want? And so while we're being acknowledged, we have to come together as a community and start putting together those asks. And that really comes from the people in the community. And that's why I was asking that question. Have we asked? What are we looking for as a community? And let's start laying that out.
Awesome. Well, thank you. But thank you guys so much. So, what do I have going on this week? I don't know, a whole lot of stuff. So Nathan and Teresha has been doing something on Thursday. What do I say? Thursdays? Is it Tuesdays?
Tuesdays.
Or you just pick a day?
Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we're
Oh,
doing
2 days.
propensities of success. Yes, 2 days. So it's propensities of success. On Tuesdays, we're interviewing different influencers. On Thursdays, it's propensities of success college edition. So this entire month of August, we are interviewing principals, deans, administrators, professors, and we're talking about how our college students and high school seniors can transition seamlessly. So all that advice you wanted going into college, and it's the COVID edition. So just trying to make it as traumatic, less of a transition as possible.
Mm, mm, mm. And David, do you have anything? David, give the information about your book when it comes to the how tos when it comes to money.
Definitely. If you're a person that may think about starting a business one day, or if you're a business owner and want to know how best to get financing for your business, I wrote a book. It's on Amazon. It's everywhere. It's called Seven Things to Know About Getting Money for Your Business. At Doriscar Capital Group, we help businesses and real estate investors get funding from microloans to north of 100 million. We fund nationwide. So if you're a real estate investor, you want to buy and flip a house, or you want to get a house and investment property for rental purposes, we can finance it. If you're a developer, you want to develop a huge project, it could be 20 million, 50 million. We do it all. Nationwide, if you want an SBA loan, not PPP, but like, a loan for your business, we have preferred funders within our consortium. So please look for us. Also look for the book if you want to know how best to position yourself to getting funding.
Awesome.
Great book,
Listen,
David.
I'm working on my credit now. I've been building it, been doing my thing. It's just been getting great. I'm trying to get that million and that 1.5 million for what I'm trying to do. That's what I want. So I know I got to have at least a 750, 800 credit score for that. So what you got going on, Nathan?
Just usual. You can join us any Sunday, 9 a.m., 12 or 6 for our worship service. If last Sunday worship very powerful. We're so thankful. Every Tuesday we're in our VBS, our virtual Bible study on Tuesdays at 7. But then on Wednesdays we have a similar show with our young adults, Hot Topics. We fuss, fight, and argue about the various topics and things going on in
It
our
be Pastor A,
society,
y'all.
and we just have fun with our young adults. And then we're starting next week. We're going to go back to our Thursday shows where we're going to be talking with pastors from around the country as to how we're going to make it through this pandemic, pastoring during a pandemic. So we're looking forward to that. And then probably starting in September, we're going to be doing some relationship shows,
All right.
getting
Well,
in
good
depth
luck.
with marriages and different things of that nature. So
Well,
We took a
y'all
little
gonna be
break.
busy, but I'm gonna ask this question, and I'm gonna get off. I'm gonna ask this question. I'm gonna get off. Are we actually listening to our pastors right now? That's all I gotta say. And put it good. So y'all can put it on y'all show. Are we listening? Are we listening? Because I see people trying to bring up the prophecy pastors again and all this. But are we at that stage where we're listening at the era that we're in? We know that the young people aren't. I'm gonna tell you that right now, because their mind is totally different. Because they feel a little bit more free now when it comes to religion and what they can do. During this little period and era. But I'm just gonna just say, Tanisha, ask this question to your pastors, guys, okay? I want to thank everybody for watching the Table Talk already show, and I want to thank all of the guests who are here. Just remember that it is early voting started today for Miami-Dade, and next Saturday, is it Saturday? Next Saturday starts, or the 8th, whichever day that is,
Mm-hmm.
starts for Broward. So, guys, if you're gonna do the early voting, if you feel like you still want to have that, people have that sensation of getting out of their car, walking and voting and going in. That's fine. Just make sure that you stagger along. Make sure that there's no crowd. Make sure that you are safe. And don't be pressuring nobody out there what they need to do and need to vote for. And don't be looking at them pit cards either. Vote on your own. Get to know your candidates. All right. All
Thank
right.
you
Thank you
so much
guys for
for having me.
joining.
I really enjoyed
Hey,
being with
Thank
one
you.
y'all.
vote,
Sheila, Pastor,
27 years. Good. That's a long time.
Thank,
yeah,
Time for some
thank you so much.
fresh.
Have a great night. Thank you for having me.
Stay right there. Hold on a second.